Yeah, that everything. Video, images, no need to worry. Okay, so hello everyone. This is Sandip Bose, motivational speaker and communication trainer. Welcome you all to my YouTube channel, Sandip Bose Motivational Speaker, and those of you who are watching us from Sandip Bose English Academy. Thank you so much for joining us. So today we are having a special guest on the occasion of 258th birth anniversary of Raja Ram Mohan Roy. We have Dr. Aniruddho Sanyal joining us from all the way USA, Pennsylvania. Sorry, Philadelphia. Sir, how are you doing? Hello. Dr. Sanyal, can you hear me? Hello. Hello. Yeah, please join, sir. Please join. Due to network issues, I think we lost him. So, Dr. Sanyal, if you can see me, then please join the link. You're out of the box. Okay, so on the birth anniversary of Raja Ram Mohan Roy, we have a special guest. Okay, so on the birth anniversary of Raja Ram Mohan Roy, we have a special guest with us, and he is Dr. Aniruddho Sanyal. So, Mr. Dr. Sanyal is joining us from Philadelphia, US. So, it's late night over there, and it's early morning in India. So, Dr. Sanyal, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me, Sandip?
Yes. I can hear you. I can hear you. So, how are you doing, sir? How is your day? It's late night in the US, isn't it?
Yes, it's almost getting close to midnight. But
midnight, right. Thank you so much. Right. Thank you so much for joining us and giving us this time of yours. We truly, appreciate that. And it's a great, occasion for us because it's the 250th birth anniversary of Raja Ram Mohan Roy. We are celebrating. So you have made a documentary film on Raja Ram Mohan Roy. So definitely we'll show the audience some clippings of it later. But let us tell our viewers that what made you this make this film. What provoked you to make this film on Raja Ram Mohan Roy? There are so many historians, but why you choose Raja Ram Mohan Roy for this for your documentary? And I think it is your first documentary, right? Documentary film.
Yes. So first of all, thanks for me, Sandip, and apologies that there were out the Facebook Live that come back. Hopefully, it's working now. As to what
Yeah.
got me started, Raja Ram Mohan Roy, honestly, as I explained in the document, that's something that grew over time because I've been posted in London, not London, it was Bracknell at the time, in my
Okay.
day job as a software developer. And I had read that Ram Mohan Roy died in Bristol, and Bristol was near, so I just went to see his tomb over there.
Okay.
But back then, it was not possible to cremate stuff. So I went to visit Bristol and started to look at many memories in the city that are associated with Ram Mohan Roy. I was initially a but the story unfolded as I gathered a lot of forgotten details about his life. His life, toward the end of his life, that seemed to be a fascinating chapter. Most of us still knew. So it became sort of to find out more about. Also, the time I was dealing with some difficult personal issues. One example was very interesting. He was accomplishing great things. But personal life was in great distress. You are probably aware. On to make sure that substance would not be reinstated.
Yeah.
Various reforms, various to deal with the Privy Council. He was he accomplished all his goals, but this was happening while personally he was getting great financial. He was away from India. He said he did not have the money to come back. So personally, it was a very difficult accomplish his greatest deeds during that phase. So it was for me to look at that, somebody with my compassion and probably the first NRI who had gone to Bristol now almost 200 years ago, and finished to London, and then his last days were spent in Bristol. Was such an example, and as I read about, the more I was, what he was like ocean, which is he spoke, voluminous writing, publications, newspapers. This was for him to fight his own this have the British government at the time abolish this hideous practice. And as you look at one Sati.
Sorry to interrupt. Yeah, Dr. Sanyal, sorry to interrupt. Can you use headphones? I mean microphone, because some of your voice are not coming clear. It's cutting in between, sir. Do you have any headphones? I mean, that would be better.
Give me 1 second. Now.
Sure. No issues. So it's a great honor and privilege for our channel that Mr. Sanyal has joined us from US.
So this is a nice pair of headphones. Is it better?
It's better. It's better. Sounds clear. Absolutely.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah. So
So,
you're
did you
talking
have any
about Ramon's
questions?
struggles. Yeah, you are talking about the
Yes.
struggles which he has to face. Yeah.
And I
Please
think
go ahead,
that
sir.
that can serve as an inspiration to all of us, because all of us have various struggles we are dealing with. Uh,
Right.
all of us have fears and anxieties and so on. So it was above all else a great example of someone who was able to set these personal issues aside and
Right.
still keep the focus on the most important tasks, the goals. I think that's where I mean, of course, most of us are not Ram Mohan Roy, but
Yeah.
hopefully we can take some of the
Right.
principles he followed and apply in our own lives and try to make our lives and the lives of those around us a bit better.
Absolutely. Absolutely, sir. So the first question which I would like to ask you, you born and brought up in Kolkata. What circumstances made you move from India to US? If you just tell our viewers your upbringing, maybe your childhood, the growing up years.
Well, I was in a middle class family, and very you know uh, not anything extraordinary in my upbringing, but I had very supportive parents. I was very fortunate. My parents always believed in me, always supported me in whatever I wanted to do. I was at the time I was studying economics, and I was just getting finishing my bachelor's degree when my father said I should apply. And I wasn't very keen, honestly. I wasn't very keen to come to America, but I applied to various universities, and I was very fortunate that I got full scholarship in one of the universities where I had applied. Everything was paid for. My parents had to get me a plane ticket and some pocket money, which was a lot of money for them at the time. But that's how the journey began. So I came to America, did my master's degree at SUNY at Stony Brook, which is in the New York State. Then did my
Okay.
PhD in Dallas in Southern Methodist University, and then worked in the banking sector for quite some time. Then I worked in the risk technology sector, and in fact, the documentaries that you see on my YouTube channel are all made as sort of a serious hobby, you might say, um,
Okay.
based on my travels relating to my professional work. So I had been sent to England for 3 years, during which I made two documentaries, one on Ram Mohan Roy and the other one on Prince Darukanath Tagore, Rabindranath's grandfather, who I think is a
Right.
very interesting person and much misunderstood. I made a very light-hearted documentary about a very eccentric Englishman who ran a taxi service in London with ambassador cars he imported from India. So you'll see things that are of interest to the Bengali or the Indian diaspora. That's the sort of thing that attracted me. In the case of Ram Mohan Roy, of course, there's a lot in England, touched by him. And similarly, Darukanath Tagore. Actually, Darukanath Tagore also died in England, and he's actually buried in London. Very few people at the time knew that. My documentaries shed some um, light on these things and brought about some awareness. Not
Okay.
that it was totally unknown; it was known in maybe the scholarly circles, but it made the knowledge about it for it started several things. So, for instance, a delegation then went from India. A businessman from Calcutta donated money to repair the tomb of Ram Mohan Roy, and one person, Mr. Poddar, he paid generously. And then Darukanath Tagore's tomb, which had fallen into disrepair, uh, was getting more attention. from other groups based in London. So, I think my documentaries, in a small way, served the purpose of raising awareness about these great sons of India, of Bengal, that met their end in a foreign land. And,
Right.
even though their accomplishments in India were well known, some of the
Mhm.
circumstances of their last days spent in that country were brought to fore. I think to some extent, uh, my documentary served that purpose. But they were very time consuming. I spent all my spare time for several years. The Ramon documentary took about 3 years to make, Darkanath
Right.
Tagore another 3 years. But I felt like there was a story in each case that needed to be told. So,
So,
in
are
answer
you
to your
always
question, that's what motivated me.
right? Right. So, are you always a keen observer of movies since your childhood, or it is something which you developed while you were working or in college, maybe?
I've definitely always been attracted to movies, very interested in them, or the whole craft of filmmaking. I was an avid fan, still am, of Satyajit Ray, and
We all are.
all his films I've watched many times, including one of my favorite documentaries. Actually, is his documentary on Rabindranath. I must have seen it at least 100 times. So
Okay.
it was. I felt that watching his films is the best cinematic education one can have. And
Definitely.
then, as I was trying to tell the story of Ram Mohan Roy, I had to learn how to handle a camera, how to edit, all of those things I did all by myself. How to edit, how to narrate, um, and in that, definitely I was inspired. Of course, Satyajit Ray is Satyajit Ray, but as Robert Browning said, a man's reach must be beyond his grasp. What else is there a heaven for? So, um, again, Satyajit Ray was the inspiration for um, learning how to maybe, as best as I could, um, see how to best tell a story. And I thought it was quite interesting. In one of your emails, you had written that you had seen some echoes of Satyajit Ray's style of
Right.
documentary making, and I
Right.
found that to be. I was very grateful and thrilled to hear that, because he was definitely an influence, and we all aspire to learn something from him.
Okay. So, with your permission, may I play the short clipping of your documentary for our audiences so they can understand
Please
whatever we
do.
are talking about? Yeah.
Please do,
All right.
Shondip. I'll be most grateful.
Thank you. Just a moment.
Shondip, I cannot hear any sound.
Okay. No audio. Let me check just once. Okay. Just give me a moment. Now I think you'll be able to hear it. Okay. Let me know, sir.
Near the medical school.
Yeah. Now there's sound. You might have to roll it back to the beginning.
Of Ram Mohan Roy or his death mask.
Yeah, right.
It was the modern marvel of
But it seems to suggest it is death.
another.
Or just less than 10 years.
Much has been made of the fact that the Raja's sacred thread image would bring me to Edinburgh. Ever since I saw the replica death mask in Calcutta, I wanted to see the original. Ghana had established the fact that it had ended up in Edinburgh, possibly at the medical school.
When I called around all the likely places, no one had heard of Ram Mohan Roy or his death mask.
It was the modern marvel of the internet that finally came to my aid. By doing various searches with Ram Mohan and death mask, I was finally able to locate a site that was selling replica death mask for £250 to £450, literally per head. Amazingly enough, a replica of Ram Mohan Roy's death mask was also on this online catalogue. The site, belonging to the William Ramsay Henderson Trust, named Professor Matthew Kaufman as its contact. After several attempts, on the 27th of April 2004, an email from Professor Kaufman, University of Edinburgh Medical School, confirmed that the death mask was indeed in their possession, but on permanent loan to a storage facility of the Scottish National Portrait Gallery in Granton. An email from its custodians confirmed that the original death mask with the reference number and Rai, spelled Punjabi style with an I, was at the Granton facility. It took 6 months of negotiations via email and phone calls to secure the permission to see and film the mask, not in public view since 1886. Next morning, I arrived near the waterfront. The impressively named Granton Art Centre was in fact only a storage facility. There are no exhibitions and it is not open to the public. As I wondered where I could get some coffee, my main contact person arrived. Alan Barkis, a former policeman with a soft corner for the arts, looks after this facility. He was the person who 6 months ago had confirmed for me on the phone that the original plaster cast was indeed there. He had made the special visit on a Saturday with his wife when the facility was closed, just to help me out.
This death mask is not normally on display. I don't know if Anne will explain that to you, would you?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Alan had taken the trouble to bring out the mask from the shelves to put it on display for filming from different angles. Finally, there it was, an exact image in 3 dimensions of this giant of the Indian Renaissance, within hours of his death 171 years ago. Even if photography had been invented by then, there would be no way to get such a complete picture of the Raja's appearance, but for this simple measure that belied the remarkable foresight of Dr. Eslin. It became apparent that the Calcutta mask was not a replica after all. The original showed somewhat smaller and asymmetric ears. It also seemed smaller in size, normal for a Bengali gentleman about 6 feet tall today, but perhaps big in volume for the period as reported in contemporary accounts. It seemed somewhat elongated from the side, as casts from the front and the back seemed to be imperfectly joined together. The study of the shape and protuberances of the head, called phrenology, was popular in Scotland at the time. It was believed to reveal character and mental capacity. The Raja's head was charted and studied in great detail, very likely by noted phrenologists Gall and Combe, themselves immortalized by their own death masks. His head was believed to reveal traits of firmness, conscientiousness, self-esteem, and love of approbation. The last quality was believed to explain his chief flaw, which was his inability to say no, an Asian trait of acquiescence that sometimes put him in an awkward corner. Even there, Lant Carpenter rose vehemently to his defense, explaining that that was part of his indulgent Eastern etiquette, and that no man stood more firmly in the face of adversity than the Raja when the situation truly demanded it. The phrenologists also found traits of secretiveness, combativeness, benevolence, and pessimism in him that they sought to reconcile with his life, and the attempt seems at once quaint and interesting, if not entertaining. His lack of veneration and wonder was believed to be the reason why he placed so little stock in the tales of miracle of any faith, and valued logical thinking above all else. Even though phrenology is now discredited as a science, the death mask of Ram Mohan, commissioned
Sandip, your microphone's cut off, it seems. You need to switch your microphone back on.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So I was just saying that it must be a unique experience for you to see the death marks for the first time, because it was not in the public limelight since 1886, as mentioned in the documentary. So how was your experience? Because you were filming the documentary at the same time you're experiencing history. So how's the feeling inside you? How you felt at that point of time?
Absolutely extraordinary feeling that I can barely describe in words.
Right.
For some reason, I felt almost that as if Ram Mohan Roy felt like my own family at that point, because as you can tell, this mask was taken, this imprint of his face was taken within hours of his death, back in 1833. So at that time, about over 170 years ago, and
Right.
so it was as though I was living or reliving that moment. And I had read a lot about, if you see my film in full, it's discussed in great detail. There are the daily accounts of the doctor who looked up after him, Dr. John Bishop Estlin. And what struck me especially was the fact that, here he was visiting England from what was becoming very rapidly a colony of the British Empire. And here he was, held in the highest esteem possible. And in the documents that you see, they express such wonderment that such a man, because they did not think very highly of Indians as a people overall. But they were extremely impressed with him. They thought of him as comparable to any of the greats of Europe at the time. And they honestly, they wondered this, I have made some allusions to it in the documentary, but the actual writings are quite stark. They're saying, this benighted people, the Hindus, people who burn their widows and so on, how is it that somebody like this might be born amongst them? So as you can see in that documentary, right after where you cut off, further down, you see people like Jonathan Swift, Isaac Newton, and so on, the greatest of the great of that country. He's placed amongst them. So even though phrenology now is not viewed as a science, it was very popular then. You can see references to it by Arthur Conan Doyle in the Sherlock Holmes stories, for instance. So it was quite the rage at the time. The important thing is they saw him as such an extraordinary man not only for the reforms he was introducing in India, but he had a huge impact also on Britain. Lately, an American professor has written a book about Ram Mohan's influence on the making of Victorian Britain. So his influence went beyond just India, and they viewed him as a godlike being. So that was the first thing that struck me, and I was sensing almost a personal sense of loss for this compatriot of mine, another Indian, another Bengali, who at the time had gone to England when there were very few people going there. It would be kind of like going to the Mars for us, and there was very little chance of actually being able to come back. So leaving everything behind. Ram Mohan was a prosperous man in India, but he had to accept a lot of difficulties, poverty, and so forth when he was in Britain. The climate didn't suit him, but he undertook all of those challenges and difficulties so he could do the best for his people. So I felt immense respect, and in that video, as much as I could, I tried to capture those emotions. And I would urge everybody to watch the documentary in full, and not for my sake, but because it's such an extraordinary story that I felt that needed to be told for future generations, of generations to come, such as perhaps people, your students who are attending, or youngsters, that they have some idea about what this very extraordinary man had accomplished. So it was a mixture of all of those feelings. It was very overwhelming, I must say.
Right.
So I'm rambling. I don't know if that answers your question.
Absolutely, it does. And Dr. Sanyal, please take us through that reference point, because there must be some reference or research. Lot of research you have done. How difficult was the research, and did you have any reference movie or any documentary to watch for while making or while filming this movie? And how difficult was the research? Because the details that anybody can see in this documentary was, you have gone absolutely in micromanagement. We can understand by seeing the documentary. So it must be very difficult for you to get the details. And also take us through the moment when Ram Mohan departed from India. So what were the circumstances? If you can bring that moment for us.
Yes, as you say, there were a lot of details. So I read a lot in English. I read a lot in Bengali. I read in some other languages also, for example, in French, which is another language I speak, and various other sources to gather together for myself the various details of his life. And as I said, it's enormous. It was an absolutely back-breaking chore, as you can imagine, just to sift through all that. And of course, in a film, you can't put everything because it would get very boring to watch. On my Facebook page, for instance, today I have placed an outtake from the film, because I had to after it was made, I had to shorten it. It's about the doctor who looked after Ram Mohan Roy in his last days and made sure that he had a comfortable and dignified ending. As John Bishop Estlin, whom I have referred to in the documentary too, he had the foresight to note down what happened to Ram Mohan Roy, which is how a Calcutta neurosurgeon called Dr. Nipin Bhomik was able to actually reconstruct or deduce the fact that he was affected by meningitis. Back then, the doctors didn't know. In 1833, infectious diseases, bacteria, etc., were not well understood. So, but Dr. Estlin had tremendous foresight, because he described all the symptoms in detail, and as well, he was the one who took the initiative to take this, this death mask, this imprint, because obviously back then there was no photography, And even if there were, you wouldn't get to see the face in 3 dimensions. So lots of detail went in there that, as much as is possible, I've pointed to or highlighted in the film. As far as the circumstances that led to his departure for England, what had happened was he had persuaded the British government, or the Viceroy at the time, William Bentinck, to pass an ordinance to stop this practice. And Bentinck, under the influence of Ram Mohan Roy, intervened and made that happen, which was quite extraordinary because the British did not want to get involved in religious matters of the local populace. So it took some persuading. But as this happened, Ram Mohan Roy's opponents, who were conservative Hindus, people like Radhakanta Deb and so on, they actually found an English lawyer to send to the Privy Council in Britain, because they said that Sati was integral to the practice of Hinduism and needed to be reinstated. So then Ram Mohan Roy made it his life's mission. As you might be aware, and it's pointed out in my documentary, Ram Mohan Roy's own sister-in-law, Alok Manjari, had gone through this hideous practice, and it ended her life. And it affected him very profoundly because she was close to him in age. And he actually built a house in the crematorium, not far from where she had been cremated. So he made it his life's mission. But he needed the funds, he needed the title of a Raja that would open doors for him. So he took a commission from the Mughal emperor in Delhi, who was at this time just an emperor by name, somebody called Shah Alam II. And Shah Alam gave him, the initial money and so forth, so he could actually make the journey. But because he was not happy with the East India Company because of curtailments in his pension, various land reform issues, and so forth. So there were some issues of that nature that needed to be dealt with, and he commissioned Ram Mohan Roy because he understood the legalities and British law and so forth. But Ram Mohan's own agenda obviously was, to not only fulfill those obligations, but also make sure that he made the case in front of the Privy Council so that Sati could not be resurrected. And this is where, the firmness of his mettle comes to the fore, because, he knew that he was undertaking a perilous journey. And sure enough, his funds were cut off. The Mughal emperor didn't keep his word, and his own money, which was held up by a company called Macintosh, had failed in Calcutta. So he was in dire straits. He wanted to borrow £2,500, but that was denied. And he and his adopted son and the 2 servants that went with him became, the whole retinue had to seek refuge in, with Land Carpenter in Bristol. He arranged for them to stay in a place called Stapleton Grove. And Ram Mohan, I think all this distress, because he himself was a very prosperous man, he was never a recipient of charity. So those circumstances, those humiliating circumstances, I think, served to shorten his days. And,
I think
3 weeks.
Yeah, as you were saying, he was much ahead of his time, and the due credit that he didn't get from the India. I think as far as the grave is concerned, and also the statue that we can see in Bristol, which you have showed in your documentary, says for its own that how much he respected in a different country, which is not his motherland, right?
Yes, I think it is quite extraordinary that I don't think there's any other, or it'd be hard to find examples, even Rabindranath or Gandhi, it'd be hard to find examples of where, Ram Mohan Roy only stayed 3 weeks in Bristol, the last 3 weeks of his life. And look at that giant statue. I don't think anything like that has been erected for other Indian greats. At least it doesn't come to my mind just off the top of my head. So it's quite exceptional that he is commemorated like that. And as you say, yes, he was very much ahead of his times. And I would say that he's even ahead of our times, because the harmonious relationship that he strived to achieve between the religions, the peace he tried to, the interfaith dialogue that he had started, even now, look at our world. So many atrocities are committed in the name of religion. There's so much division. There's so much violence and so on. So he was not only ahead of his times in the 1800s. He's even in the 21st century. We are falling far short of his ideals. So.
Thank you so much.
But yeah, obviously he accomplished some great things.
Absolutely. So here I want to bring one more aspect. You are talking about Ram Mohan, how he was ahead of his time. You talked about Satyajit Roy, who was also ahead of his time. And even today's filmmaker also says that he was much ahead of his time. You met with a person in London while you were making this documentary, or maybe after you finished this documentary, who we can say also ahead of his time. He's none other than the millennium superstar of the millennium you met. So I just wanted to show my audience that picture of yours, which you taken during your stay in London. So this is the picture with the legendary Amitabh Bachchan.
Yes,
so, sir, please take us through this moment. Yeah, please.
Yeah,
please take us through this one.
I'd like to say in Hindi, "Meri zindagi ka kabhi na mitne wala panna" is how I see it. It was extraordinary. I got the invitation because I had made the documentary, and somebody in the Indian High Commission in London, Mr. Rajat Bagchi, who was there, the Minister Protocol, and at the time the High Commissioner of India, Kamlesh Sharma, they had both taken a lot of interest in my documentary, and they arranged for a screening at the Nehru Center. That's how this visit by Amitabh Bachchan for the IFA. This was by people attended on invitation only basis, and I was very lucky that I got invited, and then I met him one-on-one. It was arranged by Mr. Bagchi that I could meet with him, and one of the greatest moments of my life, because I then recited his father's poem to him, which I knew by heart. And he was very moved by that. He was, very much, when it comes to Harivanshai Bachchan, he's just like a little boy. When I started to recite, Raat Aadhi Khinch Kar Meri Hatheli Ek Ungli Se Likha Tha Pyar Tumne, he was so moved. He held my hand in his two hands, and he started to recite with me. What can I say? And I've met many film personalities, in my travels and so on. I've never met anybody like Amitabh Bachchan, who looks even more impressive in person than he does on screen, if such a thing is possible. And when I first saw him, I was, 12, 13-year-old boy. The film Zanjeer had just come out, and we were astonished. We'd never seen any movie hero like that. And it's extraordinary that 50 years on almost, he's still number one. Jitendra, another Hindi actor, as you might know, he said that in Bollywood, Amitabh Bachchan is number 1 through 10. Everybody else begins at 11. I believe that. And I saw him that day, for 2 or 3 hours that he was there. We were all sweating because it was a small place. It had got hot and so on. He was completely composed. during that entire time, I did not see him eat or drink anything. So it was, what I could see from him was that he was a very disciplined man. And I told him at the time that I wanted to make a documentary about his father. And he was very happy to hear that. He said, yes, come to India, meet with me, and we'll definitely make that happen. But it was difficult for me to follow up. And when I finally managed to go to Bombay to meet him, on that very day, somebody in his team died. So all appointments were cancelled. And, it was just unfortunate. But who knows, I haven't totally given up hope. Someday I'd like to, because I'm very fond of the poems of Harivansh Rai Bachchan. And Amitabh Bachchan's recitation of them is just such a beautiful, in his mellifluous and sonorous voice when he recites those poems. There's nothing like it. So, it was, an extraordinary day of my life that I'll never forget. And it was actually, I owe it to Ram Mohan Roy. Absolutely. Because if I hadn't made that documentary, these connections would not have happened.
So your hard work taken you to the great man, isn't it?
Yes, I think, I'm a very mediocre person, but I work very hard. I try to do the best that I can with what resources I have. I think, I feel that, it's just that, every one of us, God gives every one of us certain opportunities, and we should be so grateful to have them, and make the most of the time we have. And I think the Ram Mohan Roy story, for instance, I felt that it was a sacred obligation for me to relate. Initially, I had thought I would just take some pictures, post in my high school group. I just saw Ram Mohan Roy's tomb, etc. But the story grew on me. And there were so many aspects of it that were so extraordinary. For instance, the fact that Ram Mohan Roy's tomb is all looked after by retired English people. There are not so many Indians around. You can see in that documentary, once a year, the Indian High Commission sends some, for 27 September 1833, the day of his passing, to commemorate that. There's a function, there's some singing and so on. But throughout the year, it's these retired British people that look after his tomb. And also, you'll see in the documentary, he was initially buried in the house where he lived, in the garden in Stapleton Grove. But when Dwarkanath Tagore went 10 years later, in 1843, on what we call a business trip, he decided to exhume the body and have it reinterred. And he had William Prinsep, whom he knew very well, to design this chhatri. It's a very extraordinary structure in a cemetery in Britain because it looks like a Hindu temple. It's quite a character. And it was built, and also therefore Ram Mohan Roy also got me started on the story about Dwarkanath Tagore. And it became very intriguing for me as to why we know so little about him. And then I realized that, people have very wrong impressions of the man. He's very misunderstood. And in the writings of Rabindranath, there's no reference almost, practically none, even though Rabindranath's great hero was Ram Mohan Roy. And Ram Mohan Roy would not have succeeded in what he tried to do without the staunch support of Dwarkanath Tagore. So I started to get very intrigued about, Rabindranath's silence on the subject of his grandfather. So that was the subject of my second documentary on Dwarkanath Tagore. Why was it that there was no mention of him in the writings of Rabindranath? But lots of references in the life
songs.
of Satyendranath, who was Rabindranath's elder brother, who became the ICS officer, and Ganodanandini Devi, who followed him to Britain. Lots to discover there. In fact, I felt very sad about because Ram Mohan Roy's mausoleum in Bristol gets a lot of visitors. Dwarkanaths at the time didn't. In fact, most people, even Tagore scholars that I spoke to at the time, were not aware that he had actually died in London and he was buried there and so forth. Both these men died before cremation became legal in England. So cremation didn't become legal till about in the 1880s. So both Ram Mohan and Dwarkanath knew that if they died while on their trip, they would not even have a proper Hindu, last rites performed. And as you can imagine, back then that took a great deal of mental fortitude to come to terms with. And Dwarkanath is also another exceptional man. So I would urge all of you to look at both of those documentaries and feel, hopefully, the pride that I felt about these sons of India, sons of Bengal, that contributed so much in their times, that actually shape us in many ways the way we are today. Look at India, the fact that we got the English education that they had championed and so on. It's just given us a certain edge. And today in the IT industry and so forth, we have an edge that, if we spoke Portuguese, we wouldn't, so, there were many things they foresaw. And with the data they had available, they did not realize that there would never be equality under the British. That was, at the time, some great things were being done. The Car and Tagore company was formed. It was the first multinational company. The Asiatic Society was being set up. If you read William Dalrymple's books, The White Mughal and so forth, a lot of cultural exchange was also happening. A lot of the British officers and others who were coming to India at the time, they were learning our ancient languages. For example, Sanskrit was very much resurrected by some European scholars. So a period of great cultural confluence was happening in that time, the late 1770s and the first half of the 19th century, all the way, let's say, before the mutiny, before imperial arrogance set in. The British and the Indians that had come together, in many cases, were doing some quite extraordinary things. And Dwarkanath and Ram Mohan lived in that period. So, and I think they were very good. They were very effective in leveraging their relationship with the British rulers of the time to bring relief in certain ways, to improve their lot, bring in English education, help set up the Presidency College, obviously eradicate Sati, and several of these measures that for which we can be grateful.
Okay, so on that note, you bring about one person, which is the great Rabindranath Tagore. We fondly call him Gurudev. So in many of his songs, we see the sense of Ram Mohan, and you showed in your documentary also so many songs of Tagore you have used. And later today, you have another session with where you will be talking about Ram Mohan songs. So it's a great honor for us if you can take us through those songs, or the Ram Mohan songs you fondly call it. How did it came to your mind to use it? And definitely you said that the influence of Satyajit Roy was there, but what about the Ram Mohan songs? And if you can answer this in Bengali, because so many people are watching us from Kolkata especially, so they will be very much delighted if you say in Bengali few words about the Ram Mohan songs and the Rabindra songs as well.
অবশ্যই রামমোহন রায়ের 4টে গান আমি ব্যবহার করেছি আমার ডকুমেন্টারিতে। একটা হচ্ছে স্বর পরমেশ্বরে, আর একটা ভাবো সেই
Is it
একই।
written by
এবং
Ram Mohan Roy?
হ্যাঁ, গানটা
Right.
লিখেছেন এবং রামমোহন রায়ের দ্বারা রচিত এবং সুরারোপিত, আর সুরটাও
Okay.
রামমোহন রায়েরই দেয়া। এবং উনি
All
ভারী
right.
চমৎকার ভক্তিগীতি লিখতেন। এবং উনি আমি 4টে গান ব্যবহার করেছি। সত্যজিৎ বাবুর ছবিতে একটা গান ব্যবহার করা হয়েছিল, যারা আপনারা চারুলতা দেখেছেন, সেখানে একটা গান ছিল মনে করো শেষে সেদিন কি ভয়ঙ্কর। তা সেটা আমার কাছে মনে হয়েছে সেটা হয়তো এই যুগের উপযোগী অতটা নয়, কিন্তু রামমোহন রায়ের গান আপনি যদি লোকজনকে শোনান, যারা রামমোহনের গান শোনেননি, তারা কিন্তু মনে করবেন যে রবীন্দ্রসঙ্গীত শুনছেন। তার কারণ হচ্ছে কি, রবীন্দ্রনাথের উপর একটা মস্ত বড় প্রভাব পড়েছিল। রবীন্দ্রনাথ ছোটবেলায় ব্রহ্মসঙ্গীত শুনতেন, এবং শুধু রবীন্দ্রনাথ না, বিবেকানন্দ, যিনি উনিও শুরু করেছিলেন জীবনটার ব্রাহ্ম সমাজের সভাগায়ক হিসেবে। দেবেন্দ্রনাথ ঠাকুরেরও লেখা কিছু ব্রহ্মসঙ্গীত আছে, কিন্তু রামমোহন রায়ের গান দিয়ে কিন্তু এগুলো প্রথম শুরু হয়। এবং কালকে মানে আপনাদের ওখানে আজকে সন্ধ্যেবেলা যে প্রোগ্রামটা হবে, কলকাতার একটি আর্টিস্ট, আমার পরিচিতা, নাম রীনা দোলন বন্দ্যোপাধ্যায়, উনি গাইছেন। এবং আমরা তো জানি সতীদাহ প্রথা নিবারণ ইত্যাদিতে রামমোহন রায় তার অবদান বলাই বাহুল্য। বলা যেতে পারে যে রামমোহন রায় যুক্তিযুক্তভাবে বলা যেতে পারে যে উনি ভারতবর্ষের প্রথম ফেমিনিস্ট। এবং কিন্তু আশ্চর্য ব্যাপার হচ্ছে যে নারী মানে মহিলার কণ্ঠে কিন্তু রামমোহনের গানের রেকর্ডিং খুব বেশি নেই, কয়েকটা আছে। তা সেইটা বদলাচ্ছেন আমাদের রীনা বন্দ্যোপাধ্যায়। উনি 18টা গান গেয়েছেন রামমোহন রায়, তার মধ্যে থেকে কালকে উনি 5টা রিলিজ করবেন। এবং আপনারা যারা উৎসাহী, যারা এই ব্যাপারে জানতে চান, তারা ওই লিঙ্ক যেটা আমি আমার ফেসবুকে পেজে দিয়েছি, সেটা আপনি দয়া করে শেয়ার করবেন, তাহলে লোকে শুনতে পাবে। এবং আপনারা দেখতে পাবেন যে রবীন্দ্রনাথের রবীন্দ্রনাথের ওপর যে, অবশ্যই রবীন্দ্রনাথ তো আমাদের ওপরে মানে সবচেয়ে বড় প্রভাব ওনারই, কিন্তু রবীন্দ্রনাথের ওপর সবচেয়ে বড় প্রভাবটা কার, সেটা যদি শুনতে চান, তাহলে আপনারা অবশ্যই সেই প্রোগ্রামটা শুনবেন। এবং আমার ডকুমেন্টারিতে যে 4টে গান আছে সেগুলোও শুনবেন। আমার ডকুমেন্টারি থিম সংটা করেছিলাম, ওনার যে গানটা আছে নিত্য নিরঞ্জন, আর আরেকটা গান আছে কি স্বদেশে কি বিদেশে। এরকম আমি 4টে গান ব্যবহার করেছি, কিন্তু ভারী চমৎকার গানগুলি। এবং অন্যান্য গান যেগুলো আছে, যেগুলো রীনা কালকে রিলিজ করছেন, সেগুলো যদি আপনারা শোনেন, আপনাদের ধারণাটা আরো স্পষ্টতর হবে। এবং আমার ধারণা রীনা বোধহয় একটা গান রাখার কথা ভাবছেন, যেটা মানে ডিরেক্টলি রামমোহন রায়ের যে গানটা, সেটা কি রবীন্দ্রনাথ কিভাবে তার সেটা কিরকম ভাবে রবীন্দ্রনাথ ইন্টারপ্রেট করেছেন বা অ্যাডাপ্ট করেছেন, সেটা সম্বন্ধেও একটু আইডিয়া পাওয়া যাবে কালকে এই অনুষ্ঠানটা দেখলে। তা অবশ্যই বলবো যে রামমোহনের অনেক গুণের মধ্যে একটা গুণ ছিল যে উনি অসাধারণ গীতিকার এবং সুরকার ছিলেন। তা আশা করি আপনারা যারা আজকের এই অনুষ্ঠানটা দেখছেন, তারা আজকে সন্ধ্যাবেলা সম্ভব হলে ওই রামমোহনের গানের অনুষ্ঠানটাও দেখবেন। আর আমার কথা তো অনেক শুনলেন, আর কত বোর করবো আপনাদের, আপনারা এবং রীনার গানটা শুনুন সন্ধ্যাবেলা।
আপনি যেমন বললেন যে গানের যে 4টে গান আপনি ব্যবহার করেছেন ডকুমেন্টারিতে, সেই গানের মাধ্যমে মানে গানগুলো শোনার সময় আমারও মনে হয়েছিল যে এগুলো হয়তো রবীন্দ্রসঙ্গীত, কিন্তু আজকে সেটা আপনি ক্লিয়ার করে দিলেন যে এগুলো সবকটাই রামমোহন সং। এবং মানে আমরা বুঝতে পারছি এভাবেই যে রবীন্দ্রনাথের ওপর কতটা প্রভাব তিনি ফেলেছিলেন সেই সময়। তো অনেক ধন্যবাদ ডক্টর সান্যাল জয়েন করার জন্য।
রবীন্দ্রনাথের আপনাদের একটাই শেষ কথা বলবো, রবীন্দ্রনাথের লেখা একটি প্রবন্ধ আছে, সেটা অবশ্যই পড়বেন। রবীন্দ্রনাথের লেখা প্রবন্ধটার নাম হচ্ছে ভারত পথিক রামমোহন। তা সেটা পড়লে দেখবেন যে মানে রবীন্দ্রনাথের হিরো, আমাদের হিরো তো রবীন্দ্রনাথ, আমাদের সুখ দুঃখের সব কিছুর সাথী রবীন্দ্রনাথ, কিন্তু রবীন্দ্রনাথের হিরো যিনি ছিলেন, তিনি ছিলেন রামমোহন রায়।
একেবারেই তাই। অনেক ধন্যবাদ ডক্টর সান্যাল আমাদেরকে সময় দেওয়ার জন্য। আমি জানি এখন হচ্ছে অনেক রাত্রি হয়ে গেছে, তা সত্ত্বেও আপনি এসছেন, আপনার সময় দিয়েছেন, মূল্যবান সময়। তো তার
না
জন্য
ভাই,
আমরা
আমার রাত্রিটা আপনারা ধন্য করে দিলেন। আজকে আমি অনেকটা মানে এই এই যে প্রচারটা হচ্ছে, এটা হোক, এর জন্য আমি আপনাদের কাছে কৃতজ্ঞ। কারণ ফিল্মটা আমি তৈরি করেছিলাম 2006 সালে। আমার 2003 থেকে 2006 2000 পর্যন্ত লেগেছিল ফিল্মটা তৈরি করতে। তারপর এখন এতদিন পরে আমি দেখছি ইউটিউব ইত্যাদি বিভিন্ন জিনিসের মাধ্যমে, এইসব ইলেকট্রনিক প্রযুক্তির মাধ্যমে অনেক বেশি অ্যাটেনশন পাচ্ছি, অনেক বেশি লোক দেখছি। তখন যখন করেছিলাম, ইন্ডিয়ান এম্বাসিতে দেখানো হয়েছিল, এরকম কয়েকটা জায়গায় দেখানো হয়েছিল, একাডেমিক জায়গাগুলোতে, কিন্তু সেইভাবে কিন্তু মানে ডকুমেন্টারিয়ান হিসেবে কোনো স্বীকৃতি আমি কিন্তু তখন পাইনি, যেটা এখন পাচ্ছি। এখন লোকে দেখছেন, এবং আমার মনে হয় যে আমার নিজের জীবনটা তো তুচ্ছ, কিন্তু আমি আমার এই কাজের মাধ্যমে যদি রামমোহনের জীবনের উপরে কিছুটা আলোকপাত করে থাকতে পারি, তাতে যদি লোকে দেখেন, উদ্বুদ্ধ হন, তাহলে আমি কৃতজ্ঞ বোধ করব। এবং আজকে আমাকে আপনি যে সুযোগটা দিয়েছেন আপনার দর্শকদের কাছে এটা তুলে ধরার, তার জন্য আমি আপনার কাছে ভীষণভাবে কৃতজ্ঞ।
ধন্যবাদ ডক্টর সানাল। এবং আমি এখানে একটা কথা বলতে চাই, আপনি নিজে এখন ইউএসএ আছেন, তো আমরা অনেক সময় পাশ্চাত্য থেকে আমরা এক্সপিরিয়েন্স নিই বা এক্সাম্পল দিয়ে থাকি, বাট আমরা যদি আমাদের নিজেদের যে অতীত, অর্থাৎ আমাদের ভারতবর্ষের যে ইতিহাস, তা যদি আমরা অধ্যয়ন করি বা পড়ি, সেখানে আমরা দেখতে পাবো যে এমন কিছু মহীয়সী মানুষজন, আপনি বললেন রামমোহন, বিদ্যাসাগর, স্বামী বিবেকানন্দের কথা, তাদের থেকে যে এক্সাম্পল আমরা পাবো, তা তা কিন্তু কোনোভাবেই পাশ্চাত্যের থেকে কম নয়। আপনি নিজে এখন ইউএসএ আছেন, বাট বাঙালিরা সেই যুগে যা করে গেছে, এবং তারা অনেক আগে, তাদের সময়ের অনেক আগে তারা ভেবেছে, চিন্তা করেছে। তো এর থেকে বড় ইন্সপিরেশন আমার মনে হয় না কিছু হতে পারে। এবং অসংখ্য ধন্যবাদ আপনাকে এরকম একটি তথ্যচিত্র নির্মাণ করার জন্য এবং সেটা তুলে ধরার জন্য। কারণ এখন তরুণ প্রজন্ম তারা প্রতিনিয়ত ছুটে চলেছে, এবং মানুষের লাইফ খুবই ব্যস্তপূর্ণ জীবন, তার মধ্যেও তারা যদি এরকম একটি সুযোগ পায়, এরকম একটি ডকুমেন্টারি যেমন আমি পেয়েছি, এবং আপনার সাথে কথা বলে আমার মনে হয়েছে যে এটাকে সামনে আনা উচিত তরুণ প্রজন্মের সামনে। এবং শুধু তরুণ প্রজন্ম নয়, যারা আমাদের মা বাবারা আছেন বা বয়স্ক যারা, তাদেরও এটি অনেক ভালো লাগবে। এবং থ্যাংক ইউ সো মাচ ওয়ান্স এগেন, বিকজ ইউ হ্যাভ টেকেন সাচ difficult path, not only for Rammohan, but also you have taken another, you have made another documentary on Prince Dwarkanath Thakur. So যার ব্যাপারে কিন্তু অনেক কম মানুষ জানেন, এবং অনেকে জানতেনও না যে রামমোহন হয়তো ব্রিস্টলে মারা গেছেন, বা মাত্র 3 সপ্তাহ, আপনি বললেন 3 সপ্তাহ উনি ছিলেন। এবং প্রিন্স দ্বারকানাথ ঠাকুর, উনিও ব্রিস্টল, উনি কি ব্রিস্টলেই ছিলেন না উনি অন্য কোনো শহরে ছিলেন ইংল্যান্ডে?
না, উনি লন্ডনে ছিলেন। এবং সবচেয়ে দুঃখের বিষয় হচ্ছে যে দ্বারকানাথ ঠাকুর সম্বন্ধে লোকের ধারণা যে উনি একজন উড়নচণ্ডী জমিদার, চরিত্রহীন, এবং মানে উইথ অল ডিউ রেসপেক্ট, সুনীল বাবুর যে বই আছে সেই সময়, তাতেও যে ওনার যে চিত্রায়নটা, সেটাও সেইভাবেই সেই দোষে দুষ্ট যে উনি ওরকম দুশ্চরিত্র লোক ছিলেন ইত্যাদি। আদৌ তা নয়। কারণ আপনি যদি দেখেন, মানে দ্বারকানাথ ঠাকুরের প্রতি অগাধ শ্রদ্ধা ছিল বিদ্যাসাগরের। আপনি তাহলে ভেবে দেখুন যে সেটা কেন হচ্ছে, কেন ছিল, বিদ্যাসাগর কেন তাকে এত শ্রদ্ধা করতেন? হ্যাঁ, মানে দুশ্চরিত্র লোক হলে তো করতেন না। কাজেই কতগুলো ভ্রান্ত ধারণা আমাদের মধ্যে হয়ে গেছে, তার বিভিন্ন কারণ আছে, সেটা আমার অন্য ডকুমেন্টারিতে আমি অ্যানালাইজ করেছি। কিন্তু উনি বিরাট বড় বাপের মানুষ ছিলেন, এবং সেটা আপনারা দেখবেন। আর আপনি যেটা বলছেন, পাশ্চাত্যেই থাকি আর প্রাচ্যেই থাকি আর যেখানেই থাকি আমরা, আমাদের মানে আমাদের যে মনীষীরা, আমাদের যারা এই ধরনের অবদান করে গেছেন, তাদের জীবনের থেকে আমরা যে উদ্দীপনা পাবো, তার কোনো বিকল্প নেই। আপনি পাশ্চাত্যেই থাকুন, আপনি জাপানে থাকুন, যেখানেই থাকুন, আপনি তাদের কাছ থেকে তাদের জীবনটা যদি আপনি আইডিয়াল হিসেবে রাখেন নিজের সামনে, সেটা আপনার চলার পথের পাথেয় হিসেবে, তার কোনো বিকল্প নেই। তাতে আপনাকে যে আত্মবিশ্বাসটা যে দেবে, সেটা কিন্তু আপনাকে পৃথিবীর যে কোনো প্রান্তে, পাশ্চাত্যেই হোক আর প্রাচ্যেই হোক, আপনাকে কিন্তু সেটা অনেক দূর এগিয়ে নিয়ে যাবে। কাজেই আপনি একদম ঠিক কথা বলেছেন যে আমাদের এই জীবনগুলো আমাদের ওই কারণেই অধ্যয়ন করা উচিত।
এবং অদ্ভুত একটা মিল, যেটা মানে একদম শেষ মুহূর্তে চলে এসেছি আমরা, আমি শেষ করব অনুষ্ঠান। অদ্ভুত একটা মিল, সেটা হচ্ছে যে আপনি রামমোহনের কথা বললেন, সতীর কথা, সতী থেকে তারপরে বিদ্যাসাগর এবং বিদ্যাসাগর বিধবা বিবাহ বন্ধ করেন, তারপরে ব্রাহ্ম সমাজে কিন্তু যেমন হচ্ছে রামমোহন সক্রিয় ছিলেন, সেরকম ভাবেই আমরা যদি দেখি পরবর্তীকালে বিবেকানন্দও কিছুটা ইনফ্লুয়েন্স হন ব্রাহ্ম সমাজের মাধ্যমে। এবং শুধুমাত্র তাই নয়, উপেন্দ্র কিশোর রায়চৌধুরী নিয়মিত ব্রাহ্ম সমাজের একজন একনিষ্ঠ একজন কর্মী ছিলেন। তারপরে তার ছেলে সুকুমার রায় এবং পরবর্তীকালে সত্যজিৎ রায়, যাকে আমরা সবাই নিজেদের ইন্সপিরেশন মনে করি। আমিও ছোট মোটো কিছু ফিল্ম নির্মাণ করি এবং সেখান থেকেই ইন্সপিরেশন পাই। যতই নতুন সিনেমা এবং নতুন ওয়েস্টার্ন মুভিজ, হলিউড যতই থাকুক না কেন, সত্যজিৎ রায়ের প্রসঙ্গ এবং একটা অসাধারণ অ্যামালগ্যামেশন হয়েছে, মানে যেটা কিন্তু মানে ইটস এ গোল্ডেন পিরিয়ড। তো অনেক ধন্যবাদ ডক্টর স্যান্যাল এতটা সময় দেওয়ার জন্য। আমরা এখানেই অনুষ্ঠান শেষ করব।
অনেক ধন্যবাদ আপনাকে এবং আপনার দর্শকদেরকে।
এবং আপনার যে লিংক আছে চ্যানেলের, আমি আমার ইউটিউব চ্যানেলে যখন এই ভিডিওটি দেখবে সবাই, সেখানে আমি পোস্ট করে দেবো এই ডকুমেন্টারি যে লিঙ্কটি আছে। আপনারা সবাই, আমি সবাইকে অনুরোধ করবো যে আপনারা একটু যান এবং আপনাদের নিজেদের মূল্যবান সময় একটু ব্যয় করুন। ডক্টর সান্যালের যিনি ডকুমেন্টারিটি যিনি বানিয়েছেন, একটু দেখুন, অসাধারণ লাগবে, আমার লেগেছে এবং যাদের সাথেই আমার কথা হয়েছে তাদেরও অসাধারণ লেগেছে। তো আপনারা অবশ্যই আপনাদের যে ফিডব্যাক তা জানাতে পারেন ডক্টর সান্যালকে। এবং আরেকটি ডকুমেন্টারি যিনি বলছেন
মানে আপনাদের কাছে মানে স্বনির্বন্ধ অনুরোধ আমার যে মানে ভালো হোক মন্দ হোক কমেন্টগুলো কিন্তু ইউটিউবেই রাখবেন, কারণ আমার মনে হয় যে ইউটিউবের যে অ্যালগোরিদম গুলো আছে ওখানে মানে ভিউইং হলে এবং কমেন্ট হলে ওটা আরো ভিজিবিলিটি পায়। আজকাল দেখছি অনেকে ওখানে কমেন্ট রাখছেন মানে যাদের সঙ্গে আমার কোনো পরিচয় নেই, কিন্তু অনেকে লিখছেন যে তাদের কাছে এটা একটা ইনভেস্টিগেটিভ ডকুমেন্টারি এরকম মনে হয়েছে, তারা নতুন তথ্য জানতে পেরেছেন। তা সেই মর্মে যদি আপনারা কমেন্ট রাখেন, লাইক দেন বা সাবস্ক্রাইব করেন, তাহলে এই এই ব্যাপারটাও আর একটু প্রচার পায়। কারণ ভারতবর্ষে বিশেষত বাংলার বাইরে কিন্তু রামমোহন রায় সম্বন্ধে অনেকেরই খুব ভ্রান্ত ধারণা।
একদমই তাই, একদমই তাই। তো আমরা পরবর্তীকালে যদি সম্ভব হয় আমরা আরো একবার আপনাকে পেতে পারি, যদি আমরা প্রিন্স দ্বারকানাথের উপর কোনো অনুষ্ঠানে বা জন্ম শতবার্ষিকীতে হয়, অবশ্যই আপনাকে আমরা চাইবো আপনি আবার আসুন আমাদের অনুষ্ঠানে এবং দর্শকদেরকে সমৃদ্ধ করুন আপনার যে জ্ঞান এবং আপনি যেভাবে চিন্তন করেছেন এবং নির্মাণ করেছেন ডকুমেন্টারি গুলো। তো এর সাথে এটাই বলতে চাই, সবাই ভালো থাকুন, সুস্থ থাকুন। ডক্টর সান্যাল ভালো থাকুন, সুস্থ থাকুন। এবং আমরা এই মুহূর্তে একটি কঠিন পরিস্থিতির মাধ্যমে যাচ্ছি, সবাই কঠিন পরিস্থিতির মাধ্যমে যাচ্ছি। তো আপনি কোনো শেষ মেসেজ বা কিছু যদি বলতে চান ইয়াং জেনারেশনকে স্পেশালি, কারণ ইয়াং জেনারেশন এটা দেখছে, তো কিভাবে তারা লাইফকে অ্যাপ্রোচ করবে, কারণ এই মুহূর্তে একটা কঠিন সময় পরিস্থিতি সবাই ফেস করছে এবং বিশেষ করে এই জেনারেশনটা এখন তাদের মানে কিছু করে দেখাবার সময়, তো সেই সময় তারা বাড়িতে বসে রয়েছে। তো তাদের উদ্দেশ্যে যদি কোনো ছোট বার্তা আপনি দিতে চান।
দেখুন মানে ওখানে পরিস্থিতি এতই কঠিন এখন যে আমি বার্তা দিতে গেলে সেটা প্রায় জ্ঞান দেওয়ার পর্যায়ে চলে যাবে। আমি এটাই বলবো যে আপনারা সবাই সুস্থ থাকুন, নিরাপদে থাকুন, মাস্ক পরুন, বাড়িতে থাকুন, যথাসম্ভব সতর্কতা অবলম্বন করুন, যথাসম্ভব তাড়াতাড়ি ভ্যাকসিনটা নিন। এবং এখন হয়তো যারা খুব অল্প বয়সী তাদের কাছে হয়তো একটু বোরিং লাগছে বাড়িতেও আবদ্ধ হয়ে থাকা ইত্যাদি, কিন্তু এই সময়টা পার হয়ে যাবে। এবং এখানে আমার মনে হয় যে এখানে রবীন্দ্রনাথ আমাদের কিন্তু একটা মস্ত বড় পাত্র। আমি বাংলাদেশের একটা প্রোগ্রাম দেখছিলাম, সেটা আমি আবার ফেসবুকে দেব, আপনি বা আপনাকে লিঙ্ক পাঠিয়ে দেবো, আপনি একটু দেখবেন যে বাংলাদেশে ওরা কিভাবে রবীন্দ্রনাথকে মানে অবলম্বন করে রবীন্দ্রনাথকে এই কঠিন সময়টা কিভাবে পার হচ্ছে, সেটা এটা কিন্তু সত্যি দেখার মতো জিনিস যে রবীন্দ্রনাথ মানে এখানে দুটি দেশ, দুটি ধর্ম ইত্যাদি সব মানে অতিক্রম করেও রবীন্দ্রনাথের আমাদের কাছে কতটা প্রয়োজনীয়তা। এবং সবসময় আমরা জীবনের যখন আমাদের জাতীয় জীবনের যে মোড়গুলো, সেই সময়তেও কিন্তু আমরা রবীন্দ্রনাথকে স্মরণ করে আমরা মানে উতরেছি আর কি। বাংলাদেশের ইতিহাসেও তাই, ওদের স্বাধীনতা সংগ্রাম ইত্যাদিতেও রবীন্দ্রনাথের ভূমিকা। কাজেই রবীন্দ্রনাথের জীবনের আদর্শগুলোকে আমার মনে হয় আমাদের আবার করে খতিয়ে দেখা উচিত এই সময়। আর আশা করছি, এখন যা খবর পাচ্ছি, এখন মনে হচ্ছে যে কিছুটা প্রশমিত হচ্ছে। আশা করছি এই ঘোর দুর্দিনটা কেটে যাবে, কিন্তু ধৈর্য হারাবেন না, এটাই বলবো।
একদমই তাই। এই বলেই আমরা অনুষ্ঠান শেষ করব, এবং আবারও অসংখ্য ধন্যবাদ ডক্টর স্যানাল আসার জন্য এবং আমাদের অনুষ্ঠানটিকে সমৃদ্ধ করার জন্য।
আপনাকে ধন্যবাদ, অনেক ধন্যবাদ।
থ্যাংক ইউ সো মাচ।
ধন্যবাদ ভাই।